Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Gabriel Allen Cummings.
And I'm Sonika Garcia, and this is Breaking the Code,
a podcast series by the Havas Medical Anthropology team. We're here to take the BS out of behavioral science by illuminating the why behind the what of behaviors, rituals, and symbols that people take for granted. We hope to arm you, our listeners, with the tools you need to make sense of behavioral science and help you apply it to your work as communication extraordinaires. So welcome back, everybody. This is a really special episode. We are either at episode 50 or approaching episode 50, if my math is correct. Another reason why this is extra special is because it actually has to do with a bias of mine that I recently learned about, that, all Gabriels are actually pretty great Gabriels. And if there anybody listening to this and just thinking that, oh, this guy Gabriel, he's just talking about himself. No, it's actually talking about our guest. We are joined by Gabriel Robinson. He's a rising sophomore at George Washington University. He's interested in working at the intersection of finance and marketing, and that's how he finds himself as an intern on our team. Gabe, welcome to the podcast. How are you feeling?
Good. Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to speak about a topic I feel I can speak so well about. So yeah, thank you for having me here.
Yes, we're very excited. I'm really interested in this topic too. I think it's gonna be a good conversation. I guess I'll give a quick intro and then let's just dig right in. So today's topic we're titling it Social Media Diagnosed Me. And really it's about the fact that TikTok threads, Reddit, forums, social media has really become the new doctor's office in many ways, where people go to seek answers and find communities and sometimes even walk away with the diagnosis, right? So like these algorithms are starting to replace experts and the doctors in that sense. And so today, and I think in this conversation, we really want to explore the cultural rise of, the movement of self-diagnosis on social media, and just kind of get into some, human truths around what it reveals about our need for control, connection probably, and even a little bit of uncertainty, a little bit of certainty in a very uncertain healthcare landscape. Gabe, thanks for bringing this topic up. I think it was a really interesting one. And why did you pick this topic?
Yeah, I picked this topic. Well, first, I feel like I can speak on it from personal experience and from people I know, like being kind of the younger end of Gen Z, just like how Gen Z is kind of tackling entry-level healthcare. That's what I like to call it. And I think of like when you first get sick, my parents would usually think, let's go to the Minute Clinic at CVS or even your pediatrician. But people my age, including me, I just think, why not? Let's look online first, specifically social media, where you can directly contact other people, mostly strangers, and if they've had similar symptoms to you and what they've done to help it, and kind of create a community where, we've all been through this kind of like, sometimes like you're so desperate for like just relating to somebody and how to better it. And yeah, I think it's really replacing that, like, what I like to call it entry-level healthcare.
I love entry-level healthcare.
Yeah. I mean, I really love that point just because I think, and we'll get into this in the episode, but I feel like one of the points you're getting at now is like, there are a lot of aspects of the healthcare that aren't just the information, but it's like the care around the information and the delivery of it. And so having that level of camaraderie that can come with social media, it seems like an important piece of this. I think that one thing that's important to talk about as we kick off this conversation is like, why is this happening now? You mentioned that you're younger Gen Z. I am older Gen Z. We've been calling Gabe young Gabe. I've been called OG. That's been original Gabe to my face, but I think it's older Gabe behind my back. I don't think 25 is old, by the way. But I think it's important to have a conversation about why this is happening now. And this is one of the things we kind of, tossed back and forth as we were preparing this conversation. One thing that you brought up that was really interesting is the role that social media has played, or the roles it has played in the lives of someone who's Gen Z. I kind of think of it as like a cradle to grave experience, but I'd be interested to kind of pick your brain a bit more about like, what are the different roles that social media is playing in health and outside of health?
Yeah, I think that inside of health, like it's kind of creating a community. Again, like when you go to the doctor, you're just directly getting help from a professional. Online, you're kind of getting a more relatable experience. These are not professionals, so they don't need to tell you, exactly correct details, which is sometimes a good thing. You don't always want to hear like the textbook definition of what you have and the textbook definition of how you could like help that, whatever you have. But, you know, talking to people that have had firsthand experience with it and how they've dealt with it in different ways can create like a really relatable and just more casual like healthcare experience.
I think to that point, it's also being reinforced. I know when I go on TikTok, a lot of times it's not just people saying, you know, this is my experience or whatever, but they actually directly say, I've been to so many doctors and they all got it wrong. And, you know, I finally, this is what it is. And then you almost feel like in that they're gaining trust, but then at the same time, making you question the trust that you have in doctors. So it's not like it's just happening for no reason. I think explicitly people are stating the doctors are getting it wrong. And like, you know, here's where you can come for like the real deal. So yeah, I think
and that's an interesting point too, just in doing a bit of kind of, you know, cursory reading before the podcast, that if you go on PubMed, they do like evaluations of social media and a bunch of different disease states. And one of the overwhelming kind of takeaways is, of course, like the level of misinformation that's there. I do think that there's like, in addition to that, there's like a higher level of stigma when you get your information from social media. We talk a lot about how patients are going to be educating themselves. And one of the things that we've talked about is that social media is kind of an inevitability. Self-diagnosis and these things are an inevitability. And it's really more of a conversation of how we make these things safe. I think from an HCP perspective, just again, in doing this scan, one of the things that was kind of missing was that actionability piece. And so they're great at providing information about potentially what you have, what you're seeing going on. But when it comes to like taking that extra step or really taking any step, that's not totally there. One thing I wanted to ask about, and Gabe, I just wanted to jump off your original point, was the idea, like we're talking about Gen Z here. So Sanika, I kind of wanted to turn it to you as far as like millennials interaction with social media, maybe even broadly, because I see social media as like, it's the space to get a job. It's the space to find love. It's the space to diagnose yourself. It's so many different things, like, again, that cradle to grave experience, just because like YouTube came out in 2005. And that's the example I always go to. I have childhood shows that I watched on TV, but I also do have like things like Smosh and different like channels that I follow throughout my youth that are now 20 years old and stuff like that. So Sanika, I did just want to call out here, as we do break the code here and say what people aren't getting quite right. How would you say a millennial's interaction with social media throughout the years is different from Gen Z?
I mean, I think we just have a longer experience of that anchor of like our doctor is the most knowledgeable, important person. And so that was really programmed in us from such an early age. And we lived most of our adult life, our life in general, but most of our adult life believing that. And so for me, and I know a millennial, it's, you know, these generations are 20 years, so everyone has a different experience. But for me personally, I think that I will go to social media as the initial before I can see my doctor, before I can validate it. But I still look for that validation from my doctor as like now like a two-step. So previously, if I would just, you know, call my doctor up, now I'm like, let me be a little bit more informed before I get there. So yeah, I think I want to do a bit of my own research, and I turn to social media for that. So I have some things in my back pocket that I bring up, and I'm very candid with my doctor, you know, like I saw this and they're like, oh, like, you know, on social media, I'm like, yeah, like this is what people are saying. And I think doctors even these days are, yes, you'll have some that are just like blow that off, but others that kind of lean in and acknowledge that that is a place that people are getting information, and it's better if they just address it and kind of, you know, accepted and like, you know, they're just not like, so I don't want to hear it, because then you're just going to turn people away. My doctor specifically is very open to that. And so, yeah, I think it's just, for me, it's just a two-step process.
I think it's interesting that you said that, because I think being Gen Z and growing up just after kind of the rise of social media, like Gabe said, YouTube was created in like 2005. I was born in 2006. And I think being born into that, growing up, parents are kind of teaching us like, oh, this is an amazing tool like YouTube. You can look up any video and make any video and kind of search anything you want. So growing up, like we kind of immediately had that trust with social media. And I think that's kind of forming into like, now that Gen Z is getting older, like how we're using it. Like we're not using it to just like look up, fun like Smosh videos, but now using it like I have a stuffy nose, like what can I do to help it? Or I have these symptoms. What do you think I may have? And yeah, like how trust in doctors and social media has changed with generations. It's
Yeah. Well, yeah, social media, well, not only was it new during my generation, but also it was immediately met with like, if you think back to like MySpace, which is the first social media that I remember, it was like, you can't trust anyone and anything. And it's the scariest place and you will be kidnapped and no one is who they say that they are. So it's like all of that too. Just like I said, that programming of like social media is not believable, you can't trust it. So yeah. It's wild. I was just going to say, I think that while, all of these points are valid and social media is a place where, like I said, I use it. It really does serve value when it comes to medical inquiries and maybe a diagnosis. I don't know if I'm completely there yet. I do think that there are harms of self-diagnosis as well. And something that you had brought up, Gabe, was, the relatability aspect and people like you and the community. And I think that really goes a long way in having people trust social media. But I think that the harm is that too. It's the benefit, but also the harm. So it's the harm of self-diagnosis through social media isn't just like, oh, I got it wrong. No one is going to write you a script for something that you self-diagnosed, right? I mean, I don't think so. You still have to like see a doctor in some capacity. I think the biggest harm though is mistaking that relatability for accuracy. So something is more accurate because it's coming from someone who's like me, or I have, I have that relatability with. To me, that there's a lot of harm there because relatability and trust is such a strong emotion that at some point people can someone that you trust can pretty much tell you anything and you're going to believe it. And I think the algorithm also, just being a tool in and of itself, feeds us content that sort of mirrors our fears and not medical facts. So it's sort of this echo chamber. I know when I start to look up certain medical issues on TikTok, then I'm just fed all these stories of it being that diagnosis. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, it has to be this, because to me, now the algorithm has made me feel like the numbers are so much bigger than they are. So it can be like a scary, vicious cycle. I think so. And then you take the anxiety portion of it, you could just be in a TikTok spiral and then you're suddenly like anxious about something that actually isn't your reality. So I feel like it's a very fine line of, going for information and then really being sucked into the vortex, as I always say. So.
Another thing that's so interesting, and it's from your story before where you were saying you have a two-step process, social media first, then take it to the doctor. I think one of the harms there is like also, if you just do social media first and foremost, if Gabe goes online and says, I have a stuffy nose, and they're like, stage 4, what? And then you just take that and you carry that with you. It's particularly prevalent in mental health where as we talk about a lot, the symptoms are kind of difficult to parse out, difficult to identify, and different. I mean, neurodivergence is the word that we use for a reason. In defense of social media, despite the fact that there are obvious places for it to be improved, HCPs could be more actionable. I think the individuals on there, this is more of a nice to have, but be more accurate, medically accurate. The idea that people are, we mentioned community already, but the idea that people are describing their symptoms, and I think that there's a value in being able to watch people describe their symptoms so that when you get in front of the HCP, you're not looking for words, you're not looking for different ways to describe your pain. You have a bank of knowledge, a lexicon, as we say. This is how this disease is talked about. And I think that making that so accessible will help improve care across the board in a way that I don't really see go discussed a lot. And I'll kick it over to Gabe for this. And this is one of the impetus for doing this episode at the very start without implicating anybody. But the idea that self-diagnosis, people kind of do that for clout and the additional benefits. So again, without getting you or your friends in any kind of trouble, Gabe, what have you been seeing like on the streets of your college campus? Because I'm now old Gen Z who's working. What have you been seeing in college with people kind of just self-diagnosing themselves and wearing it as a badge, especially in the cases where they probably don't have anything?
Yeah, I mean, even before college, I mean, I have 1 year of college experience, but before that, in high school, I mean, people would, I don't necessarily think actually, yeah, I mean, they'd go on like Instagram, TikTok, see like, I was diagnosed with ADHD, here's why, and relate to some of those symptoms, and then see some of the benefits that come with ADHD. I mean, you don't want ADHD, but if you do, you get extra time on testing, smaller like class groups, usually like those benefits that you don't want ADHD, but if you have ADHD, you can get those positive benefits from it, which is kind of pushing people to self-diagnose with it, being like, oh, this person had these symptoms. I think I have ADHD. Let me go to my doctor and get a doctor's note saying that I have ADHD, and now I can get extra time on the math test. And being in college, I think one of the main things, not so much test taking anymore. I think that's kind of like a high school thing. But now with college, people finding ways to get single dorms. If they don't want to have a roommate, you can go online and say, I have like these, like what can I get a doctor's note for? And then get that doctor's note, send it to housing, and then there you go, you have a single dorm. I mean, personally, I have OCD, so I have a single dorm, but it's kind of funny seeing other people that like don't have anything kind of getting the same like treatment as I do.
Wow. What a strategy.
Yeah.
I never had a single dorm.
I'll just say, I think that it kind of exposes social media in a different way too, where we were talking about taking the diagnosis and kind of running with it. But this is taking it, running with it, and, kind of making a life or a living out of it. And that's some of the social media content that you see too, which is why I can't completely say that, go to social media for all your information, despite the fact that it'll probably be what is the go-to in the future. As we said, it's inevitable. And, speaking of it being inevitable, I think one thing that's important to kind of look back on is this idea of Dr. Google and how it's turning into Dr. TikTok. And that's one of the things we've been passing around kind of colloquially as we've been getting ready for this conversation, but really talking about the future of self-diagnosis. And so my understanding of Dr. Google at the time was kind of just like you punch your symptoms in, and then you get a list of things that you could possibly have. And you maybe just, Sanika, I think this is a worthwhile conversation for us all to have, but it's like a conversation about fear. And so when those Google results give you like the worst case scenario, it's like your eyes kind of gravitate towards there. We just had an episode talking about cancer. And so anytime a cancer could come up, it's like, well, is this something that it could be?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think that the main reason that, like with Dr. Google, you were just seeing words on a page, and you can't form a relationship or trust or like that emotional connection with words on a page, right? Like, so at that point, I still think the doctor was able to be above, like you would maybe like reluctantly believe a little bit of what you see, but I don't think it was like really believing it. I think it, it was just sort of an anxiety way to see what's out there. But with social media, it's not just words on a page, it's a person and their story. And like, I think that human element of it is really what makes it, even not the reason that social media is more impactful from that standpoint than Dr. Google, but the doctor. Like, yes, some people have really close relationships with their doctor, but some people, especially in this day and age with telehealth and whatever, it's a little bit more transactional. If you've moved, you're not with the doctor that you've had all these years. If you don't have that relationship, your doctor might be of a completely different generation, completely different experience. You're not seeing that relatability with your doctor. And I think that's really what is the glue of why social media diagnosis is sticking and why people turn to it. It's like to the, relatability is such a blessing and can also be a curse in this sense. And so, I don't think people can relate to their doctor. So,
I think we're also like definitely almost phasing out of Dr. TikTok and moving on to like Dr. ChatGPT. Yeah. Like social media, like, it is less transactional. It's more like these are people that have had the same thing. It's a community. But AI it almost creates like a caretaker for you. Like, it's really empathetic towards you. If you tell it your symptoms, it'll be like, I'm so sorry you're going through this. Like, here's how we can help. And I think it just kind of creates like almost a personal doctor, even though you have no idea where they're pulling these like, treatments from. Like, when it's telling you to do this, like, how do you know that's the right thing to do? But we trust it anyways.
Are you doing what ChatGPT doctor tells you to do?
If I had like a severe illness, I probably would double check. But like if I had, like a cold and I asked it, like I did follow like the steps, and it's probably things I would have already done, like take Dayquil, but like it's like don't take Dayquil until you've had like a full meal.
Yeah.
And, like drink water right after. And I definitely
or
expanded my treatment.
Yeah, which treatment to choose? Like, do I take Dayquil? Do I take Mucinex? Do I take, Tylenol? Like, what do I take? And so I'm sure it gives you a breakdown of like even that. So
and it also definitely helped. I mean, this doesn't really have to do with it too much, but when I had a bad cold, it told me to take like Mucinex nasal spray. Mm-hmm. And normally I would do that for like a week, but it was like constantly telling me, do not take it for more than 3 days. Like, do not. And I looked it up, and it was Mucinex, like nasal spray people can get really addicted to. And after 3 days, like your nose kind of relies on it. And unless AI told me that, I probably wouldn't have known that at all. And maybe still be taking Mucinex now. But I'm definitely grateful that AI told me that.
Yeah.
One thing I'm taking away from what you two are saying is this idea of trust. And it's like, there's like logical trust and credibility that's built through a presentation of information. But then there's also this like warmth and empathy piece, that relatability that can kind of mask as trust. I feel like in my mind, I'm beginning to build an idea that there's a difference there between like the emotional trust that we feel, that we want to trust this person, a desire to trust this thing, this AI. I don't want to personify AI too much. And then there's like the trust that we get from doctors because they are giving us credible information that turns out to be true. Or in this case, Dr. ChatGPT, who says don't take nasal spray for 3 days in a row because you might get addicted. I think that there's something really interesting there as far as like the emotional piece of it, and then the logical information credibility piece of it too.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Gabe, I have to say that this is a really interesting topic as far as like social media diagnosing. And I don't know if it's something just for Gen Z. Honestly, I'm interested to see what other generations like older than all of us are doing, because I have a feeling like, parents use social media too. Our parents are on there, our grandparents are on there, and they may be the ones who are even more susceptible to, stage 4, what you have this, and really just taking for granted everything that appears on the internet. That's, typically the target audience for scams and things of that nature. Yeah. That's why my mind tends to go there. But just to kind of put a bow on this conversation, really put a bow on your time here, Gabe. And I have to reiterate on camera, I've done multiple times in person. You've been incredibly helpful to us this summer, incredibly valuable. Your opinions and information, you putting together this episode. It's been great and a lot of fun to have you. And we're going to miss when you go away. It'll be one less Gabriel on the team, which is, I'm already beginning to feel the hole in my heart. But
you'll go back to being the young one.
Yeah, I'll go back to being young Gabe, but that's I would be old Gabe any day if we could have young Gabe forever. Gabe, do you have any takeaways from your internship experience? Is there anything that comes to mind that you'll take with you as you go off to school and your excellent career and everything like that?
Yeah, well, first, thank you. I've really enjoyed this internship, and it's not over yet, but one more week of being older Gabe. I think like the main takeaway I've had is kind of just like how much goes behind just like an ad or like marketing brand strategy in general. Like I feel like getting to work on real client products, projects, not products. I've really got to see like how much goes into it, even if I'm just going on Instagram, like screen grabbing their posts, like how much that goes, like it goes a long way. And I mean, like I did some things I would never think to. And I've really just seen like I said, the behind the scenes of it all that you wouldn't see or wouldn't know about unless you have this experience.
Awesome. I'm so glad you enjoyed it.
Thank you.
That's great. Yeah, I second everything Gabe said. It was a pleasure to have you. And it's actually, I think, a learning for us too. this is like the last thing, but I think when you have someone on your team that's, when an intern, someone that you have to, we're so in the weeds of our process. And sometimes when we have to explain it and speak out loud, it reminds us, yes, of the cool, important work that we're doing, especially in medical anthropology with behavior and culture and the importance of all that in behavior. But it also gives us a chance to take a step back and reevaluate the things that we do. And, is this the best way to approach something? And I know with a lot of projects that we worked on with you, really did give us that opportunity. And so I think even for our team, it's been, it's not that you've just been learning from us. I think having you on the team, we've learned about our offering and our process and things like that. So it's been great.
Thank you.
Totally.
The summer flew by.
It definitely flew by. It's already the middle of August. Gabe, thank you so much for everything. Thank you for being on the podcast and everything like that. This was really great. If you have anybody, now I'm talking to the listeners, if you have any responses or thoughts about social media diagnosis, anything that, we should dig into deeper on a future episode, we may or may not have Gabe on there, but please reach out to us, medicalanthropology@havas.com. So thank you everybody for listening and for breaking the code. I'm Gabriel Allen Cummings.
And I'm Sonika Garcia. Till next time. Thanks for listening.
Everybody.
Bye.
Breaking the Code is a podcast by the Havas Medical Anthropology Group. Hosted by Sonika Garcia and Gabriel Allen Cummings, with inspiration coming from all of you. Thank you for listening and for your continued support. If you enjoyed this episode or had any questions for the team, feel free to leave a rating, subscribe, and send us a message to our mailbox at medicalanthropology@havas.com. Until next time.